There are lots of stories coming out of Africa these days, stories about war and tyranny and starvation. This is not one of them. This is one of those inspirational stories that you might find touching. It's about a young African woman by the name of Beatrice Bira, whose life was radically changed by a goat. That's right, a goat. And as we said when we first introduced you to her back in January of 2005, if it weren't for her goat, Beatrice wouldn't have gone to school, wouldn't have been lifted out of poverty, and wouldn't have won a scholarship to a college in America. Lots of stories coming out of Africa these days, stories about war and tyranny and starvation. This is not one of them. This is one of those inspirational stories that you might find touching. It's about a young African woman by the name of Beatrice Bira, whose life was radically changed by a goat. That's right, a goat. And as we said when we first introduced you to her back in January of 2005, if it weren't for her goat, Beatrice wouldn't have gone to school, wouldn't have been lifted out of poverty, and wouldn't have won a scholarship to a college in America. On a sweltering June afternoon in Uganda, a 19-year-old African woman comes home to the village of her birth. And is immediately engulfed as if she was some long-lost African princess. Her name is Beatrice Bira, and she's been away for over a year.
You're the heroine of the village, huh?
Almost, yeah.
I mean, nobody from your village has ever done what you've done before.
No, they haven't.
Beatrice's village, which is called Kasinga, sits nestled in a valley in the western part of Uganda. When most people hear Uganda, they immediately think of Idi Amin, the strongman who brutalized the country for nearly a decade. Idi's long gone, but Uganda, like most of Africa, is still plagued with problems. There are too many people, too few jobs, and not enough food.
Were you ever hungry when you were a kid?
Yes. There wasn't much food in our fields, and if it was there, it was almost the same meal every other day. Like you eat cassava or sweet potatoes in the afternoon and in the evening, and I must say that we were hungry.
And yet, despite going hungry and without much hope for the future, here she is on the campus of an exclusive American prep school. This is where Beatrice spent her year away, at Northfield Mount Hermon in northern Massachusetts, where she was a student. How did she get here? How did she pull off such an improbable journey? We traveled a long way to find out. This spot on the road is 5 miles from Beatrice's home. It also happens to be the equator. It runs right across this country road, so that right now, I'm standing in both hemispheres. Beatrice's life has become something like that over the last few years. She's had one foot in the African bush, the other in New England. And all because of a goat. Really, when you come right down to it, it was a goat that sent you to school.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it sounds funny, but that's how it worked out.
Yes, it is, because it's through selling the goat's milk that I was able to.
Beatrice owes her good fortune to a goat and to a charity in Little Rock, Arkansas called Heifer International that gave her the goat. Heifer is known for its work distributing livestock to poor families all over the world. In 1991, Heifer introduced goats, 12 of them, to 12 families in Kasinga. Beatrice's family was lucky enough to be among them. Along with the goats, Heifer sent a cameraman to Kasinga to shoot film of young Beatrice's life. Here she is at age 9 performing adult chores and yearning desperately to attend school. But her family, one of the poorest in Kasinga, just couldn't afford it. It seemed as though Beatrice would always be on the outside looking in.
When you were a young kid, did you ever say to your parents, I want to go to school, or did you understand that you couldn't go?
Oh, no, I kept on begging them. I was very impatient. I want to go to school. I really want to go to school.
Enter a goat. But not just a run-of-the-mill goat. The heifer goats are bred to produce prodigious amounts of milk. After struggling for years just to feed her kids, Beatrice's mother was able to sell enough goat's milk to finally afford the fees to send Beatrice at age 10 to the local school. From there, she won a scholarship to a high school in Kampala, Uganda's capital.
Start at the very top.
And she did so well that she won another scholarship to a prep school in New England, where it turns out her biggest adjustment was winter.
What was that like for you?
Ridiculously cold. It was really cold, like negative 30 degrees, and it's 20 inches of snow. That has never occurred to me in my life.
But seasons change, and for the first time in her life, Beatrice learned how to play tennis. She might never make it to Wimbledon, but she's pretty smart and won an award for general excellence.
Now I would like to ask Beatrice Bira to please come forward. Beatrice, congratulations.
Not bad for a kid who grew up with her parents and 7 brothers and sisters in a tin-roofed shack in Africa with an outhouse nearby.
Do you think that the American kids had any idea where you were from, the kind of life you had lived before you got to the school?
No, they didn't know. Most of them actually look at me and maybe thought I was African American. So I started to tell them my story. I didn't tell all of it, but I tell them I grew up in a very, very poor village and I'm trying to transition from that kind of life to this one. So I hope you'll understand me at times and don't think I'm weird or this and that. And they were very good. Yeah, but most of them were amazed, really amazed at my story.
Beatrice took us to where her amazing story began, at her old school, the one she couldn't afford to attend until that goat came into her life. Beatrice says the school hasn't changed much since she went there. In fact, it looks as though it hasn't changed in a century. There are hardly any books or pencils, and they still teach kids how to weave straw mats. It's a skill that Beatrice is still pretty good at. But then again, she was a natural at everything in school.
Did you know how to read at the age of 10 when you started school?
No, I didn't know.
So, how long did it take you to catch up with the other kids your age?
It didn't take me long, I must say, because I was very eager to go to school. Even when I got there, I made sure that I did extra work, extra homework, extra help, how to read, how to write, and I made it pretty quick.
Made it all the way to college on a scholarship. Today you can find Beatrice on the campus of Connecticut College, where she's enrolled as a freshman. Having tasted the good life at prep school in America, Beatrice remains grateful but not seduced. Despite her success in this country, she says she'll never abandon Africa.
You know, the thing is that, let's face it, Africa, your own life, the lives of most Africans are very hard. There's so much poverty here, there's AIDS, there's so many wars. And you're in a position to escape it. Do you want to escape it?
I'm not trying to run away from all these hardships. What I'm talking about is having the necessary things that you would need to live comfortably and survive. That's what matters to me.
In Beatrice's world, goats are for sharing. You get a goat, you share your goat's offspring with one of your neighbors. It's done in a ritual called passing on the gift. On our last day in Kasinga, we witnessed that ritual. The descendants of Heifer's original 12 goats were being passed from families lucky enough to have had them to other families in desperate need. Once, Beatrice was on the receiving end of this charity, and she's not about to forget it. If you could be anywhere in 10 years from now doing anything, what would your dream be?
I would love to see myself forming up maybe a school for children who were disadvantaged, and maybe an orphanage, and maybe a farm with cows or goats and giving those children milk, and I'd love to see them get healthier all by my work.
With all the money donated to help fight famine around the world, with all the grandiose plans conceived to conquer poverty, sometimes all it takes to save a child is a goat. If you don't believe that, come to Kasinga.